Am I live? 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 Hello! Hey everybody, it's Mike Meyers. Folks, say hello to me. Make sure, how's my sound? Magic Computer says my sound's great, but until somebody types in the live chat and says I sound good, I don't believe anything. Anybody there? Hello? I am live and you hear me. Okay, thank you. Sounds good. Okay. Whew, thanks guys. Jen Herrera, that looks like I see some new faces here. That's great. A lot of the old gangs here as well. Always good to see everybody on here. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Mike Meyers daily weekday Ask Me Anything. The goal of this live stream is that while we're all kind of stuck at home with the COVID virus, this gives those of us who are studying for CompTIA topics the opportunity to basically ask me anything. I avoid religion and politics, but other than that, everything's good. Pretty much wide open, concentrating on CompTIA certifications, in particular from IT fundamentals through A+, Net+, Security+, and beyond. We can talk a little bit outside of CompTIA certifications, but really the goal here is for those of you who are stuck at home and maybe your class is messed up or whatever, this is a place for us to study and learn together. Now this has been going on for not quite a month now, and in that time period we went from a pure Ask Me Anything format to more of a certain topics get asked. So I want to start with letting you guys know, here's my contact information. If you ever want me to talk about any particular topic, just send me an email. It works great. And I can, first of all, I will answer any questions that you guys want me to answer at any time. But we do tend to be running into some of these topic areas, and I want to make sure those of you who have questions that are outside of the topic area, certainly send me an email if you want to do that. You can ask here. I've got great folks with the help of Scott Jernigan's online, Dave Rush, along with some of our folks who are coming up almost on a daily basis. We have obviously got some great techs here. So anyway, those are my email addresses. You can use either one. People are sending me both. Just choose one or the other. I promise I'll get it. If you're a gamer, my Steam account is Senor Pepe. That is my phone number. It's my office phone number. So it's not a direct line to me. I would prefer that you just send me an email first, and I'll probably just send you a email back with my phone number. And when in doubt, my nom de plume is Desweds. Try typing it with your left hand. You'll see why I use Desweds. And if you want to know my Skype account or anything like that, I'm just Desweds. Okay, so with that attitude in mind, first of all, today was Yoga Day, and less than an hour ago, I did something I had never done before. You guys ready? Drum roll. Brrr. I did downward facing dog. It wasn't pretty, but I did it, okay? So like when most people do a downward facing dog, they're shaped kind of like this. Well, when Mike does a downward facing dog, he looks kind of like that. I couldn't figure out why they were so hard. I wasn't bending at the waist enough. So this is one of the downsides of having to deal with doing everything remotely. This is all done on a Zoom meeting, so I don't quite have the instructor there to help me get into a proper position. So anyway, it was funny. Yoga's good for me. I'm stretching again. I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah, all I have on is my Galbauta workout clothes underneath that. So hope I don't have to get up anyways. All right, so let's go ahead. So today we're going to be talking about 802.11. We started with 802.11 yesterday and basically went through bands, channels, CSMA, CA, some of the more basic parts. Today we're going to get into more of modulation, multipathing, multiplexing, all that kind of fun stuff. And then hopefully we'll be done today. I'm not going to talk so much. I want to make sure we get into the topic. But anyway, I see we do have a few questions on here. Dewey Tran, there you go. Welcome aboard, man. Let's see who's all here. Questions. TS, Mike, I just upgraded to an NVMe SSD and left my old HDD in my PC. I went to access the HDD, expected to have put in my username and password, but instead, all I had to do was take ownership. Man, so So you upgraded to an NVMe SSD and left your old one. So when you upgraded to the NVMe SSD, you probably installed Windows on it, is my guess. So you booted from the SSD, and the SSD, which is a brand new system, looks at your old hard drive and it says, I don't know what this is. So you took possession of it. Because you didn't boot from it, there was nothing to log into, right? So it may have an old Windows installation still on it, but you booted to the SSD. Therefore, as soon as you took ownership. It's interesting. I mean, I would have assumed that it would have seen it as a foreign disk, and that in disk management you would have brought it in. But if you didn't boot off of it, I guess if you had some NTFS permissions on there, and they were different, you with your new Windows 10, you logged in, you created a different TS account with a different password, would be my guess. If I wanted to protect my data from this type of vulnerability, would I just encrypt my drive? Yes. I live on NTFS encryption. It's very, very powerful. Oh, first of all, any of you, especially you new folks, anybody who's coming and just because you're nice enough to show up here, we always have some great deal. I don't know what our deal is today, but Scott Jernigan will type it in, but it's going to be at least 50% off either practice questions or simulations or something like that. Scott, I'm going to have you tell me. I don't know what our special is today. These are incredibly deep discounts, and you should seriously consider taking advantage of it. I think my practice questions are the absolute best questions out there, particularly for CompTIA A+, Net+, and Security+. And it's a great deal. You should take advantage of it. Also, if you are an instructor who has an active class going on right now, you're teaching A+, and you had to send all the students home, or Net+, or Security+, or IT Fundamentals, Total Seminars is prepared to really open the doors for you. We're prepared to straight up give away, I'm not kidding, give away almost anything to, got to be a school, number one, and number two, you have to have an active class, okay? So if you're teaching A+, don't go asking for Security+, all right? We're trying to help out here. We're not schmucks, we're just trying to help out. There are even some situations, I don't want to get your hopes up because it's a fairly complicated series of hoops to jump through, but McGraw-Hill is even willing to give away books. I haven't seen anybody taking advantage of that yet, or at least if they did, I wasn't aware of it. But all you have to do is contact Kathy Yale, and Scott Jernigan will type in Kathy Yale's email address into the live chat, and just send her an email and talk to her and see what you can do. So it's pretty exciting. Did I hear about the Thunderbolt flaws? No, I haven't. Jimmy, do I collect coffee cups? Yeah, by the gross. I got lots of them. This one isn't very pretty today, but I like it. What do I think about Chromebooks? You're right. I'm not a big fan of Chrome. I don't have a problem with Chrome per se, but the things that people used to love about Chrome, I can do in Firefox. Chrome being a low memory footprint. Well, it's getting pretty big now. It's right up there with Firefox. Chrome takes lots of telemetry. You have to be signed into Google to basically use them. Instead of logging into Windows, you log into Google. And I'm just not a big fan of that stuff. They work fine. They're very functional, and they're very low overhead, low footprint. The information all over the place. I feel like a fighter pilot with all these screens around me. Okay, yeah. Andrew Hutz, I came into possession of a 2 terabyte HDD. What is the best way to test it if I don't have a desktop to pop it into? Well, if you want to test it, you got to pop it into something. I mean, you can plug it into you can plug the SATA power in and see if it spins up. If a hard drive spins up, the probability of it being bad drops precipitously, or if it makes grinding noises or something like that. So you could just do a power test. But no, you're going to have to plug it into something. They have all kinds of test beds and everything, but to be honest with you, I keep an old desktop around. I just never put the case on it and plug it in with one of my back-end SATA connections and then just check it out. Bring it into disk management, do a check disk. You know, you don't have to get fancy about this. Brandon Bowman's here. Hello. Tolowit being the helpful guy. Tolowit uses an external enclosure. Yep, that's a very good way to do it. I agree. I just get so used to leaving my old, I've got one case open. But yeah, probably an external carrier would be the more elegant way to handle that particular issue. So what are the deals today, Scott? 50% off A+, Net Plus, and Security Plus Total Tester Practice Tests with the code MMLive511. All right. Thank you, Brandon. I work really hard on my A+ questions. We spend an inordinate amount of time on that. What do you recommend after A+ for help desk, Security Plus or Net Plus? Well, Matt, it really depends on what kind of help desking you're going to be doing. If you're going to be doing any kind of networking support at all, you've got to take Net Plus. Net Plus is the most important certification you'll never use. I mean, not too many people ask for Net Plus certification as on a job posting. But man, Net Plus does such an amazing job of really getting your brain around what networking is. Now, I think CompTIA did an amazing job with that particular certification, and I recommend it to everybody. Timmy O, hi Mike, I might be out of topic, but is there a prerequisite for PenTest? No, there's no prerequisites whatsoever. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by pen. To become a pen tester? Are we talking about a particular certification? Very few certifications have prerequisites. They'll have recommended things, but I'd have to know, are you talking about a particular certification or what there? I'm a little confused. Brandon Swenson, hey Brandon. Brandon, I need to call your folks back up again. I had such a nice conversation. I knew Brandon back in the day. How can I install Windows 10 Pro on an IBM 8088? You're hilarious. Hi Mike, what is software design networking? Dude, Somali dude. I'll tell you what, you're gonna have to ask me that question again because we had a whole presentation on that last week. Whole thing. Send me an email. Somali dude, here's my contact information one more time. Somali dude, this is for you. Just send me an email and I will, I'll get you an answer that way. We could bring it back up again, but we've got some really cool stuff and I don't want to waste too much time because we ran out of time yesterday, so I want to be cracking here. Travis Sermi, hi Mike, first time listener, long time listener, first time caller. First time on here, spoke with you on LinkedIn. Oh yeah, I remember you. Thank you for, hey, no problem, buddy. Glad to be there for you. Geraldine Berna, hi Mike, can you explain the difference in systems for IT versus networking? Can you explain differences in systems for IT versus networking? Not sure I want to go. Geraldine, I'm going to kind of guess that I think I know what you're asking here. The certification, CompTIA is probably the direction you're looking to go. CompTIA has their two most popular certifications are the CompTIA A+, which really works on individual systems. And so it's, understanding different operating systems, understanding the hardware, but it also has the A+ covers a lot of networking, but really in terms of looking at networking from an individual system that you want to get on a network, that you want to get on the internet. Network Plus really concentrates very broadly on what is networking. So starting with the most basic of LANs, going through all the different type of WAN systems, and certainly operating systems come into play, but network cards and cabling and copper and wireless and some basic security and all kinds of cool, how the internet works. It's a great certification. So I'd probably weigh that way. Dakota Reason, what do you think of Google Wi-Fi setup mesh? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Dakota. Google Wi-Fi setup mesh. Does Google have their own Wi-Fi? I'm not familiar with that. I have Wi-Fi here at the house, but it's certainly not a Google. Oh, I guess you're talking about like the Google Home thing. I ran Google Home here at my house for a while. I had light bulbs, Nest thermostats, garage door opener, some motion sensors, and I was running it all through my Eero mesh. EERO is the mesh system I use. Worked great, and then ported it all into Google Home, so I had a single interface. But I got tired of having to say things like, I can't even say the "buh Google," and I would say things like, turn on the master bedroom lights to 50%, where I could just go, and it was easier. So I dismantled the Google Home aspect. I still have a wireless mesh, works great, but if I want to adjust my Nest thermostat, it has its own app. If I want to open my garage door, it has its own app. If I want to turn on light bulbs, well, I don't. I actually yanked all that out. That was just irritating to me, but I no longer use it within Google Home. So I hope I'm answering that right. I'm double checking. Scott Jernigan's yelling at me. Did you answer that question? Ask that question more than once? So, guys, I'm not familiar with Google Mesh, so I'm unable to answer any of those questions. Sorry. Yeah, I use Google Home as well, but I use Eero Mesh, which I think is far faster, better. So, I mean, you guys talking about like where you take two Google Home Minis and they talk to each other? Yeah, just never used it, never played with it. Greg Davis likes Netgear. I'm not against Netgear, that's for sure. All right, anyway, guys, let's get into 802.11. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up right where we left off yesterday, and we're going to get into the concept of modulation. So let's go ahead and dive in, and let's start talking about some modulation, okay? I promise we'll leave a little time at the end for more questions. All right, so let's talk about modulation. So modulation is the process of how do you get a device to send and receive radio waves in a way that they can be represented as ones and zeros, okay? Well, there's more to modulation than that. If you're a radio guy, I know I just gave you a stomachache, sorry. So anyway, if we remember, we talked about how we had waves yesterday, and it's kind of easier if you think about this wave as kind of a fixed wave where it doesn't seem to move. It's most certainly moving, but it kind of looks like it doesn't move. Now that blue thing is the demodulator in this case that is listening. So this would be a receiver, okay? So as the signal comes in, as you can see right now, the top of the sine wave is very high up. So we can say that that's a number 1. Now we can shift the phase. So now you can see where we're picking up at the bottom of it, and that's a 0. And we can just keep going back and forth like that. But with binary phase shift keying, BPSK, you get 1 bit of data for every phase shift. Now, if we're doing this phase shifting, if we can do clever things and get more 1s and 0s, well, let's do that. So first of all, one of the things we can do is called quadrature phase shift keying, or QPSK. Now in this case, what we're going to do is, instead of just shifting the sine wave 180 degrees, we're going to shift it 90 degrees. So watch this. So at the very top, we're at a 00. At the very bottom, we're at 01. I'm making these numbers up. It doesn't matter. But if we're on a downward, halfway down, it's a 10. And if we're halfway up, it's a 11. Now, just by doing this, each phase shift gives us 2 bits of data. So these types of modulations, these first 2 ones I just showed you, were actually used in the very earliest versions of 802.11. The problem is we could do better than that. So what they came up with was something called quadrature amplitude modulation, or what I call QAM. No qualms about this. What happens here, guys, is that not only do we have a phase shift, but we also have amplitude changes. So by changing the amplitude and the phase shift, we can get a lot of combinations. It really just depends on the sensitivity of your demodulator. So one position could be, keep in mind, we have amperage and a phase shift here. This would be a 00. This would be 0, 10, 11. This could be 00, 10. The cool thing about QAM is that QAM started out, with the example I just showed you, you would get 4 bits of data for every phase shift. But if you've got the right kind of modulators and demodulators, you can be more granular about that. And that's what we call QAM levels. So the QAM level I just showed you is called 16 QAM, where it's 4 bits, 2 to the 4th power 16. But we have 256 QAM. We even have 1024 QAM, which provides 10 bits of data. As 802.11 improved and improved over the years, they came up with higher and higher QAM levels. So that's why we see all these different versions of QAM. Okay, now we've talked about modulation. Now let's talk about multiplexing. Now, yesterday we talked about the fact that you tune a wireless access point to a particular channel, but it gets a little more complicated than that. What you have is a bunch of subcarriers. So let's first talk about the idea of what's called frequency division multiplexing. So we have a chart here, which is frequency. The frequency is on the y-axis, and time is on the bottom. So if we shoot data, now in this example, it's just going to be on 3 frequencies. As long as we have 3 separate frequencies, and notice there's a pretty good gap in between those, so we call that a guard interval. That just keeps them from interfering with each other. So this was used on the very earliest versions of 802.11, and this was called direct sequence spread spectrum. It's kind of old-fashioned, but we can do better than that type of frequency division multiplexing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to change the chart here. Notice it's not frequency and amplitude anymore. I'm sorry, it is frequency and amplitude, not frequency over time. Now, watch this. Watch really close, okay? So as the signal would be coming straight at us, you would think that it looks kind of like this. But radio waves are pain in the rear ends. And if you want to see what a radio wave, a single frequency, tends to look like, it looks a little bit more like this. Now, I don't want to get into Laplace transforms to explain all this stuff because I learned it once and it bored me to death. But if you have waveforms like this, you can do something very interesting. What we can do is we can put frequencies really, really close to each other. They can overlap. Now remember, with DSSS, we had to have a guard interval to separate the frequencies, but here, we literally are overlapping these guys. The reason we can get away with this is because, I want you to look really close here. Yes, I just read Tolowit. You're hilarious, buddy. Okay, so notice when we're at the peak of the center frequency that the other 2 frequencies are completely canceled out. That's because this waveform is orthogonal to the other waveforms. So if you have orthogonal, that means when one guy's at a certain point, the others cancel out. So we call this orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, and that is what every single version of 802.11 has used for well over a decade. Now, understanding that, I can show you something that's pretty cool. Now, remember yesterday we were talking about individual channels, and here's a 20 megahertz channel. So what I'm going to do is I want to expand this out a little bit. And what you have with 802.11 is that you have all of these subchannels. Now, it depends on what version of 802.11 you're running, but it can be anywhere from 48 to 52 subchannels that carry data. There's 64 subchannels in there total, but the other ones are like null or control and stuff like that. So there's either 48 or 52, and again, it depends on the version of 802.11, how much data they carry. So we can now start showing some charts here. On this chart, you'll see we have 3 versions of 802.11, 802.11a, b, and g. We know here's the bands they run on, the maximum channel width, the relative speeds, the number of streams, which we really haven't covered yet, we'll get into that, and the type of multiplexing and modulation. Folks, you need to learn this chart, okay? Questions will show up on both A+ and Net+ on these types of questions. So take a moment and memorize that. If you got my videos or my books, I've got pretty much the same chart. I always change it a little bit, but you're not going to be quizzed on how OFDM works, okay? I did that because it's interesting, and I thought you guys would enjoy seeing it. but OFDM, DSSS, those terms, QAM, those terms are in the glossaries for A+ and Net+, I'm pretty sure. So no, you're not going to get direct questions on those, but you are going to get direct questions on this graph right here. So be comfortable with this stuff. All right. So let's move on a little bit. So I want to talk about moving past these first generation standards. 802.11 A, B, and G. A and B are about 20 years old. 802.11G is it's more than 15 years old. And 802.11 is improved. But I want to talk about some of the technologies that make 802.11 better than what we're seeing right here. One of the first ones has to do with how do you use antennas and radios. So here's an old school wireless access point. Inside this wireless access point is a transmit radio and a receive radio. I mean, it's probably the same chip, but there's two separate radios in there. One's a transmitter, one's a receiver. One of them, the transmit, is hooked to its own antenna, and the receiver is hooked to its own antenna. So we call this single input and single output. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. It's worked great, but if you want to get past 54 megabits per second, you're going to have to start getting a little more clever. So one of the things we can do is, well, let me show you what happens. The other problem we run into is when we're sending a signal out, it bounces around on stuff. And all of this bouncing can cause a problem where the receiving device can't really make out what it is. We call this multipathing. So it's like ghosting or it's like echoes that can sometimes make a problem. Now, if we add more antennas and more transmitters and more receivers, do you see that? So we had 2 on there, now we got 4. We can do stuff like, for example, let's say 2 of those antennas are transmit antennas. So now as these individual subchannels get all bounced and reflected, when they come back into the receiver system can compare them and fix them and make them better. So we call this multiple input, multiple output, or MIMO. Now, MIMO does a lot more than fixing multipath problems, but this is one of the big reasons it came around originally. For example, when we talk about MIMO, we're always talking about more than one transmit, more than one receiver. So we call each one of these a spatial stream, and this is going to have multiple spatial streams. So we can have, for example, it certainly increases the bandwidth, but more importantly, I want to get the terminology down pat. So if you have 2 transmits and 2 receives, we call that a 2x2. If you have 3 send and 3 receive, we call it a 3x3. 4, on the latest versions of 802.11, we can even have 4x4. So as you take a look at this wireless access point, you would be tempted to go, well, Mike, I'll bet that's a 2x2, right? Because it's got 4 antennas, therefore 2 are transmit, 2 receive. Well, we don't know. It could also be, for example, it could be a dual band wireless access point. It could have 2.4, which has got a send and receive, and a 5 gigahertz, which is send and receive. So you can't look at the antennas. I mean, look at this WAP right here. That is a 4x4 super late generation 4x4 wireless access point. The problem is you don't see any antennas because they're all built inside the thing. So don't bother counting antennas. It'll drive you crazy. So people ask a lot of questions. They go, well, so where are all the antennas? Take a look at this. This is directly taken from the specs for this exact wireless access point. So it's 3x3 on the 2.4 gigahertz band, and it's 3x3 on the 5 gigahertz band. You guys see that? So that would mean, well, based on what Mike just taught us, wouldn't that mean that we should have 12 antennas? 3 transmit antennas on the 2.4, 3 receive antennas on the 2.4, 3 transmits on the 5, and 3 receives on the 5 gigahertz. Well, if we just use regular old antennas and setups, that would be the accurate answer. But people like to save money and sell cheaper WAPs, so they come up with clever ideas. So let's go ahead and just turn this into a diagram. Now, if we look at this thing, first of all of these antennas are what are called dual band antennas. They basically support both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band. So that immediately means we would only need 6 antennas though, right? So we would have 3 for sending and 3 for receiving. So what do we do to knock it down to 3? Well, remember that we've got a transmitter in here and we have a receiver. Now what we do, it's pretty simple actually. We just plug the transmitter into all three antennas, and you ready? Watch this. And we plug the receiver into all three antennas. An antenna is an antenna, so basically, without getting into a big antenna discussion, a single antenna can both send and receive. This is one of the ways you'll see these type of setups. So don't freak out about antenna count. Okay, so adding these, in particular adding MIMO, we can bring in two more versions of 802.11. So first of all, there's 802.11n, which is now known as Wi-Fi 4. 802.11n runs on both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band. It has a maximum channel size of 40 megahertz. Speed, let's talk about speed for a minute. Never memorize speed for a CompTIA exam. Nobody really cares. I think you should know that like 802.11b ran at 11 megabits per second, 802.11g and A ran at 54 megabits per second. But what you're talking about now is everything from here on in is multiples. How much have they improved the modulation? How much have they improved spatial streams? You get the idea? So it ends up, once you have your multiplexing, your modulation, and your number of spatial streams, these end up being multiples of 54 megabits per second. Isn't that cool? So CompTIA will never ask you about speeds. In fact, I don't even think they ask about 802.11a, b, and g, but I'd still memorize it anyway. But it's not going to ask you, what is the speed of 802.11n? What is the speed of 802.11ac? Not going to happen. Don't even worry about it. Make sure you know their bands. That's really important. Make sure you know maximum channel widths. But for crying out loud, don't go memorizing speeds, because all of these, anything above 802.11g, all have these theoretical maximum speeds that nobody even gets close to. Not even close. So don't sweat it. Boy, was I on a soapbox there or what? Let's get back to the PowerPoint. All right. So 802.11ac, which is currently the more popular one, is called Wi-Fi 5. It runs exclusively on the 5 gigahertz band. It can go up to 160. Oh, by the way, like here on 802.11ac, it can do 20 megahertz channels. It's going to do what it can do to run the best that it possibly can. Notice the stream size is really important here. So I put 4x4 here, but for 802.11n, the 4x4 was kind of weird. I should change that to 2x2. 64 QAM, and then 802.11ac, it certainly runs at 4x4 ODFM on 256 QAM. And that's why it's getting faster, folks. It's not like they're making the speed of light move faster. They're just doing better signaling. Is Scott trying to edit me online? Scott Jernigan, I don't like spaces as much as you do. It's Wi-Fi 4 without a space between the 4 and the Wi-Fi. I literally pay him to do stuff like this. All right. Okay. So the last one I want to talk about is 802.11ax, which is just really starting to gain ground now, also known as Wi-Fi 6. It runs in the 5 gigahertz band, although it's actually designed to run in any band anywhere from 1 to 6 gigahertz. We run it in the 5 gigahertz band. It has a maximum channel width of 160 hertz. Its speed is around 11 gigabits per second. Do not count on that. And then it can run up to 8x8. So really what you're talking about there is 4 unique data streams. And then it runs on ODFMA and 1024 QAM. So those are some new technologies we haven't talked about yet. So since we've mentioned 802.11ax, let's go ahead and go back into some of the features that make 802.11ax so cool. And because we know about things like MIMO, we'll understand multi-user MIMO. And because we understand things like OFDM, now we can talk about things like OFDMA. You ready? Let's talk about 802.11ax. So 802.11ax adds 5 big technologies that make it really cool. The first is 1024 QAM. There you go, Scott Jernigan. I put a dash in just for you. 1024 QAM is extremely impressive and only available on 802.11ax. It also, but we've already talked about QAM, so I'm not going to mention that again. It does something called OFDMA, MIMO, BSS coloring, and target wake time. So let's take a look at all of these. Well, the last four. First of all, orthogonal frequency division multiple access improves on OFDM by doing simply this. So these are some sub-channels that are transmitting over time. Now normally when we look at these sub-channels, each sub-channel is dedicated to a single user. I've also spread them out, and I'm not going to show 64 here, folks. I'm only showing 4 because my PowerPoint doesn't go that wide. Because each subcarrier is dedicated to a particular user, what often happens is that over time, there's a lot of wastage on each individual subcarrier channel because there's just not enough data, or the data isn't there yet. So we may be blasting out on our entire channel, but at any given moment, some of the subcarriers are just not carrying anything. So with OFDMA, there we go, it's all it does. I mean, I make it sound like, oh, it does, it's so easy. It just basically, each subchannel is allowed to carry more than one user's information. Now, multi-user MIMO is also pretty cool. Now, we've talked about MIMO, and MIMO is using multiple spatial streams to make our data better, but with just plain MIMO, what's happened is that I can only talk to one client at a time. You see that? Multi-user MIMO simply adds this one simple function. A individual WAP can talk to multiple devices all at the same time. As many as it has spatial streams, it can talk to all of them at once. So things like broadcasting and stuff like that, MIMO really makes things move a lot faster. Next one is basic service set coloring. Now, the problem is in an enterprise system, you're going to have ESS IDs. So here's an ESS ID called Total Office 24. Now, I'm going to put different WAPs on different channels, okay? Now, I'm going to call these channels colors because it's hard to just put a number up there. So as we put different wireless access points, we work very, very hard to make sure that if two WAPs, if their basic service set is overlapping, that they're on different channels so that they don't interfere. That makes sense, right? But no matter how hard we try, problems take place. And from time to time, we end up in situations like we have here, where we have two WAPs on the same channel that are just straight up interfering with each other. So BSS coloring simply allows the 802.11 packet to carry a little bit more information that says things like what channel am I on, which they call their color, and and by having this information, if one WAP is getting interference from another WAP, it can actually read those packets, and it depends on the manufacturer, but they can do a lot of things. One of the things they can do is simply turn down the gain on their radios to keep them from interfering. And this can be handled automatically, or there are manual configurations on some of the more enterprisey stuff for BSS coloring. The next one is target wake time. Target wake time is actually pretty cool because most of the time, with every other version of 802.11, these guys are talking even if they don't need to be talking. So WAPs will do polling, P-O-L-L-I-N-G, and they'll be talking to stuff. Equally, individual devices will talk back, even if they don't really have anything to do, and then the WAPs have to respond. With target wake time, it changes that. Keep in mind, the whole idea behind target wake time is that we have all these IoT devices that are running on batteries and anything we can do. So we're trying to deal with low power equipment. And the more we can keep low power equipment from talking, the better off it's going to be. So stuff like this. So a WAP can say things like, take a nap for a little while. And then the device will go and take a nap. Or you can even say, it can pre-program the device to go, look, I know you're going to be calling me from time to time, but just check in once an hour. You don't have to do it any more than that. And what target wake time does is it dramatically reduces power consumption. And when you say stuff like this, we're talking about IoT devices. All right. So that's all I really want to be covering on 802.11. Make sure you're comfortable with the different standards. Make sure you're comfortable with the concept of channels. Make sure you're comfortable with the concept of interference. Again, no one's going to quiz you on what does OFDMA mean, okay? I put it in because I think it's interesting. And hey, if you're going to learn from Mike Meyers, you're always going to learn more than what you need. Because, well, not more than what you need, more than what you need to pass a certification. I think these types of understandings are absolutely critical for anybody who wants to be a real technician. And, so be it as it may, I think it was a lot of fun. You guys send me an email. Let me know if you like that stuff. If you don't, I've got some competitors you probably like. Okay, so I went through that really fast. So there's a couple of things that I'm not covering, not because I don't want to, it's just a time issue. In particular, one of the big things you're going to run into on 802.11 is antennas. So make sure you know the difference between like omni versus dipole versus Yagi, or highly directional as CompTIA calls it. There's even simulations that go, how do you place antennas? So if you're shooting down a hallway, you don't want an antenna that's making a big ball. You want something that's shooting down the hall. If you're on the first floor, you want to use a dipole antenna. Dipole antennas are basically take a bagel and smash it. That's the signal they make. Or an omni, which is just makes a big fuzz ball of signal. So it's something that always bugged me, because pretty much all the antennas that you see on wireless access points are like a little pole that sticks out. Now to me, that would be an omni antenna, right? Which means it makes a big ball. But they're not. They call them all dipoles. And that drove me crazy, because a dipole has one element sticking up and another element sticking down like this, and that's what makes that flat bagel shape. And it drove me crazy so much I finally got a hammer and I took an old antenna and smashed it open, and you know what it had? It had two little antennas in it. It was the coolest thing. So yeah, and they'll definitely be talking about antennas a little bit. Okay, so that is what I have on 802.11. So, oh, by the way, I'm thinking tomorrow we're probably going to do subnetting. I know people had asked about that last week, and the 802.11 went a little bit longer than I wanted. But we will do subnetting. If not tomorrow, we will do subnetting Thursday. How does that sound? And keep in mind, subnetting is really very simple. You just need a little practice, and you have to be able to count to powers of 2 in your head. So, so for those many people who said, let's do some subnetting, I'm your boy. We're going to be doing subnetting, and you're going to be shocked at how easy it is once you get the hang of it. Okay? So, do we have any questions? Thanks, Dr. Quinn. Hey, Dr. Quinn, send me an email. Seriously, you send me an email and say, what do you got for me, Mike? Because I got something for you, because I know you're an instructor. I'm just trying to find, are there any? Yeah, Brandon Swenson, especially with the 802.11 AC standard, you see all these different devices that are AC 1900 or AC 3200. So what they're usually doing there, more than anything else, first of all, the first way they cheat you, and it's cheat, AC doesn't run on the 2.4 gigahertz band, but they'll take this, it's a dual band router, so it supports like 802.11G or 802.11B or 802.11N, which did support 2.4. So they talk about those speeds as well, which I think is kind of a ripoff, because if you're in a pure 802.11 AC environment, you don't get to use the 2.4 gigahertz band. So, yeah, I don't know. But the other thing that comes in is they're trying to use the multipliers. There's a wonderful Wikipedia article that talks about this that I'd probably want to point you to. It's got good information. Yeah, Jao Sosa, I know you've been asking about the subnetting. We will definitely do that tomorrow. Okay. Austin Louet, do you give full access online with premium book bundle to your online training? I don't know. You guys got to keep in mind, I'm surrounded by a lot of people who leave me very happily in an ivory tower, and it was McGraw-Hill that came up with the premium bundle concept, and I'm going to actually count on Scott Jernigan to let us know about what the premium bundle includes. Because to be honest with you, I'm not sure. It's got to include the videos. It's got to. But I'm going to ask for Scott Jernigan to double check that for me. GL3NE. You guys did Professor Messer at 2 times speed? That's hilarious. Professor Messer's a great guy. IT training is kind of like restaurants. You actually do better when you have a number of us all on the same block. You know what I mean? So I think he has great stuff. A very different teaching style from me. Very big microphone. But great guy. Absolutely wonderful guy. Probably a better technician than me. Wildly knowledgeable person. Very different take. Very different take on things. 2.4 gigahertz mainly for IoTs these days. Yeah, pretty much. No, it's not a dangerous assumption. Well, I would be hard-pressed to imagine anybody buying a wireless network today that doesn't support both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. That would make no sense to me. I certainly, here on my network, I have 2.4 gigahertz. So I have Robot Overlords 2.4 and Robot Overlords 5. So if I've got some device and it only sees Robot Overlords 2.4, well, I now know I've got it. And if I have a device that only sees Robot Overlords 5, and I do have devices that only do 5 gigahertz band, then I got one for each of them. Works out great. Okay. So guys, we've got some questions here, okay? Yeah, because basically here's how the rules work. I stay online until the questions end, or 3 o'clock, whichever comes first. Okay, Ann McCarthy. Hey, Ann. Mike, in 802.11 A, B, G, N, ACX, if on Wi-Fi on phone, how know if on A, B, G, etc., or does it go to the best one automatically? Okay, well, your phone is going to ask for authentication. Number one, your SSID advertises. And so not only does it advertise the SSID name, but a lot of the features and functions. If you're not on the right band, obviously you would never even see those. But let's say you've got an old 802.11n running on 5, and your device only does N. And you have an 802.11ax WAP. It will be backwardly compatible. Keep in mind, there's not a whole lot of difference there. The problem is like it would have to drop the number of spatial streams. It would have to drop the QAM levels. You get the idea? So that it would connect to it. The downside is that you'll be able to connect the device, but you run into real problems, especially if you have older devices to connect to them. One of the big things you can do to speed up a network is dump old technologies and risk that you're not going to be able to connect that old 802.11g device or whatever it might be. Or set up a different SSID just for the old stuff, like I do, which I think works out pretty good. And then on my 5 gigahertz bands, I will put in, like 802.11ac only. So now I have AX. So that's going to be another one of these things where I've got to play with this to figure it out. The other thing you run into is, what is the term? We see this on a lot of devices. I'm going to log into my router real quick. And assuming I can find this, I'm going to show you something that will help answer the question. Bear with me just a minute. Okay, I got it. Let's see, can I bring the browser up here for you guys? Okay. So what I want y'all to look at here is the setting on here. So first of all, let's go to regular old straight up wireless. Here's a setting we're seeing a lot more called Enable Smart Connect. what Smart Connect basically does is it looks for the best possible connection that I can get on both bands. What's using the better, if one bandwidth is stomped and the other one isn't, go to one or the other. What the rate of the speed ratings are, utilization rate on each of those. I just kind of just turn that on and enjoy the beauty of it. But the other big one you run into, so this is under a setting called professional. Oops, you guys here. Were you guys able to see what I just did? I'm now in a little bit of a, oh well. Anyway, so this has got some, this is a Soho router, folks. It's just new. Where is one of these really handy little settings? Oh, here it is, right here, called Airtime Fairness. Airtime Fairness basically says, look, if I've got some old client out there that's trying to run something god-awful like a dual band 802.11n, I will only give it a certain amount of time because otherwise it's just going to slow down my network horribly. So that's one thing that you might want to keep in mind is turning on things like airtime fairness. And this is a universal setting. It's not just for this one. Oh, here, you guys see here's another setting here. Look at this, modulation scheme. There you go. What modulation you want to set it up? 1024 QAM, 256, or old school 802.11, which is probably going to also be 256 QAM. Pretty interesting settings. And again, home router, huh? All right. Let's see where we're at here, kids. I'm just looking for questions. Just got a few more minutes. Yeah, sorry, no giveaways today. I promise if you sit through subnetting, I'll have some kind of giveaway, but none today. Ernie can see us. You can stay awake on my tutorials. Hey, I got to tell you, one of the things I love about my videos and my books is they're full of Easter eggs. They're full of them. I can't tell you how many times I've been online gaming and somebody comes up and says something. I know they've been reading my Net Plus book. My personal cell phone number is in every video if you know how to look for it. If you want to know what kind of games I'm playing, look at the backgrounds. Most of the time, I give clues there. There's no Easter eggs here. I'm not that clever enough to do this at home by myself without my amazing crew to help me out. But yeah, I do like this stuff. I mean, this is my idea of a red hot Saturday night. I can't wait to play. Where's the other? Over here. I'm gonna be strapping that guy back up. That's a super, theoretically, it's a 10 gigabit 802.11ax home router. I paid like $300 for it. It was a little spendy, but yeah, I'm gonna be playing with this stuff. It is fun. I love this stuff. That's why I have a business partner, because I'd probably give all this away for free and I'd be broke in a week. You can hear the excitement in my voice. I am excited. It's fun. Sounds like net neutrality at Mike's house. Sounds like victory. Axe, what are main causes of OS boot failure occurs that lead to automatic Windows repair? There are so many reasons for OS boot failures. It just shatters the mind. Probably hard drive disk corruptions would probably be way up there. Would be one of the big things. Malware would be another one that causes a lot of trouble. Those would probably be the two big ones. I wouldn't put one of those as first or second. I wish my AT&T router will VLAN. Well, you should do what I do. So I've got I have an AT&T router for my native Ethernet, my native gigabit Ethernet. Yeah. Did I mention it's pretty cool that I have native gigabit Ethernet? You know, like you guys get on YouTube and you click on a YouTube channel and you just got to sit there and spin for a second or two. Mine goes bam! It's fantastic. I love it. So I get on Netflix and my movies come right up, and then I go to somebody's house who has, I don't know, DSL or cable, and I'm like, And you have this spinner. I'm like, what the heck, man? You know, gee, manies. Oh, here comes. Joe Suso, I notice a huge difference on my Linksys performance and speed with OpenWRT and Linksys. It works better on OpenWRT. Yeah, I like OpenWRT, particularly Linksys. Well, doesn't Linksys still sell the Linux-based WRT that you can tweak the bejesus out of? Forget what it's called. But yeah, you know, you can really do fun stuff with the firmware with OpenWRT. But what I do, so I've got my AT&T, and then I use one of these big fancy routers, and basically just tell the AT&T, it routes between the WAN port of my downstream router, my home router, and that's all it does. I turn off the Wi-Fi functions. I turn off most of the firewalling, except, you know, what I would, if it has some particular firewalling feature I like. I don't use any of the VLAN functions or anything. So that's why I get one of these, because that's where all the happiness happens. But I'll tell you one thing I definitely do is I make sure I have a unique username and password on that AT&T router, because if I lose my internet, one of the first things I'm going to be doing is I want to query that router, and I want to be able to do like a router reset, because my router is not in the most convenient place in the world. I want to be able to look at the lights remotely. I don't want to run down and look at the lights and make sure I've got connectivity, stuff like that. Yeah. Testing, AT&T has some built-in test stuff that makes it very convenient if I think the problem's on the internet. Thomas Robinson, my wireless network has trouble with brick wall. Yeah, yeah, brother, it does, man. Yeah. See, that's why you still wire houses. You know, everybody's like, everything's wireless. No way, baby. You know, I did remodeling on this house and basically turned the entire first floor, stripped it to the studs, and I ran Cat 6A. So, like, even when they had to install the native Ethernet ISP and they're running the fiber, they're like, so where do you want us to put the router? And I'm like, man, I've got a medium distribution frame, got a patch panel and everything, got a little home patch panel, it works great, and I'm going to just tap it in anywhere you want. And these guys are like, oh, this is great. So actually it's hilarious because my AT&T router is over my refrigerator. I wish I could show you guys. It's a pretty cool setup. Maybe one of these days when I got the house a little cleaner, I can do a little remote, show you the house. It's not real fancy, but I like it. I'm pretty proud on it. Okay, well, we're almost done. Okay, so giveaway for subnetting. Aspirin, oh, Dave Rush, you're such a card. I guarantee you that we can I'm going to make it easy for these guys. Heck, Dave, you know exactly how I'm about to teach it, so it'll be good. So subnetting tomorrow or Thursday. And I will promise that whatever day we do subnetting, I'll have some giveaways. Also, guys, remember, one more time, if you were nice enough to show up here today, take advantage of the discounts that we provide on our A+ products. Use that code underneath there and grab this stuff. These are crazy, insane prices. Take advantage of them, man. All right, well, anyway, it looks like it's 3 o'clock. Guys, great day. I had a lot of fun today. Good questions going on. Scott Jernigan, photographs? Nah, you know me, buddy. I'm fearless. I'll run the camera around and just have fun with it. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much all we got for today, so I'm going to have to let you guys go. And I will see you all tomorrow at 2 o'clock Central Daylight Time. And remember, send in questions. If you send in questions, then I can prep. I'm making these PowerPoints on the fly. Do you know that? I spend at night. So all these great animations and all that, I'm working at this stuff at night. So which means I'm going to have to put together some subnetting presentations, aren't I? And so they're all here for you. Anyway, I will see you guys next time, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, probably subnetting, but I reserve the right to change my mind. So until then, this is your Uncle Mike saying good night. Good night.